Are you looking for a place to have your quality printing done in Uyo? Look no further than Planeyo Publishers for your quality direct imaging printing. Our services include graphic design, photocopy, color photocopy, typing and printing, lamination, flex and poster, book publishing, wedding and burial programs, ID card printing, passport printing, photo enlargement. You can also make your gifts more valuable when you brand them. Let's brand your gift items and souvenirs. Visit Planeyo Publishers at number 2 Eka Street off Ikodepene Road, Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, or call 0802 7898 705 002 789 8705. Planeyo Publishers, publishing your dream works.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome to the 9th edition of Planeyo Book Circle. Planeyo Book Circle is an initiative of Planeyo Publishers, and it is a book club located in Uyo, Nigeria. The aim of the book club is to cultivate and improve the literary culture in our society. And we've been doing this for 9 months so far. We've been consistent and we thank God for everything. This is the June 2026 edition of Planeyo Book Circle, and we are here to read books, we are here to talk to authors, we are here to review books, we are here to read and understand the times. Planeyo Book Circle returns with the review of A.U. Item's Afro-Rococo. Of course, we are expecting Professor Joe Shea to talk to us about his life and works, especially his book, his latest poetry collection, Yawns and Belches. Hoping that Professor Joe Shea will be here with us. For now, we will soon take our first reviewer, who is on standby. Our first reviewer is Kehinde Folorunsho. He will be reviewing Afro-Rococo by A.U. Item. And we'll take him on shortly after this break from Planeyo Publishers. This message from Planeyo Publishers.
You looking for a place to have your quality printing done in Uyo? Look no further than Planeyo Publishers for your quality direct imaging printing. Our services include graphic design, photocopy, color photocopy, typing and printing, lamination, flex and poster, book publishing, wedding and burial programs, ID card printing, passport printing, photo enlargement. You can also make your gifts more valuable when you brand them. Let's brand your gift items and souvenirs. Visit Planeyo Publishers at number 2 Eka Street off Ikodepene Road, Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, or call 0802 7898 705 002 789 8705. Planeyo Publishers, publishing your dream works.
Alright, welcome back. I am about to connect with Mr. Kehinde Folorunsho for the review of A.U. Item's Afro-Rococo. Please stand by. Hello, Mr. Kehinde Folorunsho. I hope I got your name correctly.
Good afternoon, Dr. King. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good to see you. Where is your location? Are you going to reveal your location to us despite the existence of banditry?
I'm in Milan. I'm currently on campus, on Milan campus in the Faculty of Education.
Okay, because I was thinking that because we have banditry in the country right now, you'll be wary about revealing your location to the public.
I think I'm sorry for Milan.
Okay, so you're not afraid of banditry. You're not afraid of bandits.
I'm keeping my head under my.
Okay, so how is school?
December. I've graduated.
Wow. But so you've graduated. What are you still doing on campus? Are you
My place is very close. Where I stay is very close to the city. So I
okay?
come here to read or just to spend some time away from the distraction of the university environment always has that atmosphere of academic atmosphere.
So in a very poetic way, you've graduated but you've not left school.
Technically I haven't left.
That's quite interesting. Congratulations.
I think I'm allowed to do some students through something.
Yeah, congratulations. I think we'll speak more, but first of all, let us listen to the review of Afro Rococo. I hope you are set.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so you're on now.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ken Flores. Reviewing Afro Rococo by so Dr. Babin is there.
So I didn't get to.
How many minutes do I have?
No, you have a lot of time. You are not being timed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, reviewing Afro Rococo. I wrote the review, but I may not read directly from the review. I'll just share my insights on what I think. So, starting from the title, Afro Rococo, the quality of title is one thing, then the style is another thing. From the poetry, the sound system of that title, Afro, which is a treaty of Africa or African. So I think it suggests a kind of modification that is happening to the stylization of the African experience or the African phenomenon in poetry rendition from Africa. Then the other part of the title is the Rococo. So the Rococo sounds like a kind of old expression, and in the introduction to the book, there is an exposé on where the title is derived from, like the kind of style of some English poetry writing, etc., etc. And I agree that verifiability, because there are several English poetry styles, the Haiku, the Tenaga, etc. There are many English styles, English poetry styles. So to have adopted that philosophy is to have seen something quite magnificent about style and function. So I think the first angle from which I can address the plausibility and importance of that work is from title. So Rococo has comprises light-hearted verses, quite humorous, and by the discretion of the poet, any other comic feature that the poet wants to bring in. But that does not excuse the depth of ideation. So I think the depth of that work is derived from the unending, lingering, and disturbing issue of postmodernist and in African poetry.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go on.
So the postmodernist and in African poetry. And I also want to touch on that idea of postmodernist and from my reading experience, I got to discover that modernism came with a lot of changes. As a matter of fact, the transition from traditional to traditional lifestyle to modernity, modernism, modernization. These three words, modernity, modernism, and modernization, they are in the same semantic field, but they do not do exactly the same thing in the same context. So let me start from modernism. Modernism, as you know it, is a kind of transformation in art, beginning from the 1900s World War and inspiring art forms, novels, plays, and poems that address the disturbing issue of a devastated world. And one text that I see as a highly important work of modernism is D.H. Lawrence's Lady Chatterley's Lover. That text practically single-handedly addresses a whole lot of depletion in the human life, from debate, individuals, up to politics, the political structure, industrialization, personal failures, depression, poverty, you name it. So these are issues that we find rearing up in an average modernist text. Another iconic text of modernism will be Samuel Beckett's Weeping for Godot. Then when we go to P.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, we also find the destruction of the world, the devastation, the disorganized state. But let us come to art. Art also has its own form of affectation, influence, and a kind of imbalance brought about by the justice effects of modernism. I remember particularly reading recently selected poetry of Larry Peters, Larry Peters' selected poetry, and a poem that stands out for me there is the one that has to do with railway station. By the way, Larry Peters is notorious for not fighting his poems, so many of his poems are not fighting. So the prosaic representation and division of that poem is disorganized. So, by virtue of style, that already points to something important about the work. So the form already dictates the content. But that is just me digressing. Where I'm going exactly is the verisimilitude of Afro-Ukoku, the importance of Ukoku, and the magnificence of introducing that style to African poetry. We found missing the mark on the depth of the devastating issues African poetry has always represented from the modernist era. So the modernist generation of African poetry has offered us a plenitude of social issues where politics will be the superstructure, quote and unquote, be the superstructure, then the individual will be the base. Then we have issues of the Maslow hierarchy where individuals cannot achieve basic needs, then they have no business dreaming of anything fortunate or whatever. Now, in Afro-Ukoku, what I see as iconic and quite unmatched by contemporary African writing is the individualism and the universal voice. An average contemporary poem we individualize and internalize the suffering of the individual, starting from the insecurity issue, poverty, disease, hunger, those basic parasitic events that affect the human life. But the personal tone, the personalized tone of Afro-Ukoku is universal. It is a philosophical work of art, which I will attribute to the ideology we have in poems by Gabriel Okara. Now, let me take it from there. the Belokara is noted for philosophizing his poems on the foundation of African moral standard, where he seems to berate the transition to a modern lifestyle that neglects the values that Africa is known for. So the of modern lifestyle at the expense of African values, where he laments the destruction of that value, and seeing the African value system as a pillar that has been demolished by the overreaching influence, negative influence, so to speak, of the modern lifestyle, where it contrasts civilized with the traditional life. So that traditional Africa that is based on value system is what we find in Afro Coco. Although it is personalized, but it has an individualistic way of universalizing what the individual experiences as the bearer of the political disorganization and socio-cultural declension of the African society at large. So when I say the declension in socio-cultural society, now the point that Afro Coco does not essentially address politics, but of course you cannot divorce politics from African poetry. But let us give it at the level of the individual. So the socio-cultural depletion of the African society is loud, and it is the lamentation of the poet in the poem. There is one point from that collection that says one has to be something about being careful because the memes get funnier by the day. You know, the play on words in that poem already points to the age-old oxymoron of the living dead, or what we can take to be an extension of what Shoyinka is trying to say in citing his book Chronicles from the Land of the Happiest People on Earth. Now Nigerians have been described the happiest people on earth. Someone came to Nigeria or observed Nigeria so much and say that Nigerians are the happiest people on earth. Why has the person come up with that description? It is because of the way we find humor in the most troubling issue. There is nothing happening in Nigeria that the comedy skit has not addressed. Everything is funny here. And because everything is funny here, people are dying by the day. So people are dying daily. They are dying by these issues, yet we find them funny. So I want to believe this work is an important work of satire that is only, or the legacy that has only up to now been represented by the modern dramatic from Nigeria. Now, I want to take my analysis from the content. As I've said earlier on, the content is passive. Points are so passive. But the personal tone in the collection is what I think it has been described as artistic, kind of reality, where it is the poet talking, but it is not essentially about the poet. I've forgotten that phrase. It's kind of mimicry. It is the poet talking, but not essentially about the poet. So the persona in this collection has observed his environment. Observation of the environment is a whole lot of art, and I think that is what some critics have described as naturalism, where an organism is affected by heredity and environment. And when we also bring in that issue of evolution, the theory of evolution, whereby an organism is affected by the environment. So evolution is important in this point. The same thing, the same way naturalism is important. So by virtue of evolution, we see the speaker being affected by the environment. trying to adapt. And in trying to adapt, adaptation, the adaptation factor or feature in African poetry is a modification of everything that holds the human life together. If it is your dream, if it is the dream holding the human life together, the adaptation will warrant that the person shrink their dream to the present reality. So it doesn't matter how highly one may think of something, how visionary one may be. If the environment is precarious, then survival becomes the next move. So that is what I think is another iconic feature of this poem, to have observed the environment and to have spoken from the ideology of African wisdom, which is something almost far and far between in contemporary African writing. That ideology of the African environment based on, or that is situated within the context of traditional society, pillars of society. And if I may, I would quote this saying by Eric Easton in one of his plays, Pillars of Society, which says, an impudent spirit of subversion challenges our most sacred principles. An impudent spirit of subversion challenges our most sacred principles. A quote from Pillars of Society by Eric Easton. We see this subversion. This subversion is so loud in Afro because issue of betrayal, loss of mistrust, distrust, betrayal, perfidy, so to speak, severing the cord of friendship, issues like that, as well represented in Gabriel Okara's Once Upon a Time. You have somebody wearing old face, street face, office face, the mask, the mask motif of the modern life. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go on.
Okay. So the mask motif of the modern life is one interesting undercurrent of Afro-Rococo, the mask motif of the modern life. Now, this is personalized style of expression. It is impossible to remove individualism from this, because I've said the poem is more individual than it is political. And we all know that individualism is another central theme of modern writing. But even in postmodern writing, individualism is still a force of thematic preoccupation to reckon with. Now, coming back to the Pillar for Society, I said the poet has observed the environment and seeing that certain value structures are now being challenged by the subversive tendency to attain a kind of high that is inconsistent with the hard work and arduous diligence of humanity. So subversion is resulting from the subversive tendency to achieve a kind of status symbol inconsistent with the value system of the African society. Shall I take that again?
Yes, please.
So the point I'm making is that after the people lament the subversion of the value system of African society as a result of the subversive tendencies to achieve a status symbol inconsistent with the dignity of humanity. I think I have said the same thing in three synonymous ways because it's continuous. I'm not reading from the material as I have said. But I hope my name is clear.
Yeah,
The
definitely.
poem laments that subversive tendency to that.
Yes, please go on.
Okay, so the poem laments that subversive tendency to attain or achieve the status symbol inconsistent with the values of humanity. And when humanity thinks, the world becomes a dangerous zone for ambition. The immediate environment becomes we begin to talk of escapism and survival. So the issue of adaptation in Africa, that adaptation of an organism to the environment, the science fact now used in that. So that adaptation will remain the strenuous, the draining escapist model and module of adjusting. It's just like a frog. It is said that a frog adjusts to temperature. The same way, the individual is adjusting to the political temperature, the social temperature, the cultural temperature. So what is happening is like many things being wrong, many things going wrong at once. So the individual is embroiled in many failures of society, culture, politics, society. So all these failures combine to form a kind of danger zone where man cannot but recoil into his own self. So the recoiling into self it's a kind of individualism now. So man recoils to his own self, he observes his environment, he sees that nowhere is safe, trust has failed, friendship has failed, camaraderie has failed. So these are individualized tendencies of maintaining healthy society that the African society is known for. But these structures have been destroyed by some musical phenomena of socio-cultural depletion. So when we read Afro-Rococo, we see what we are reading is a spicy rendition of someone who is almost trapped in an intractable situation of socio-cultural failure. And that is why I believe this text is an important renaissance of the African value system that is only represented in the cognitive remodel of socio-political problems of African poetry. So when we read an average contemporary African poetry, you find structures or the structures, the metaphors and similes and image generally of blood, dead bodies, corpses, etc., etc. But here we find imageries of a disturbed mind. The mind is disturbed. The mind as the powerhouse. The mind as the nucleus. The mind as the seed of life. So here now the mind is the seed of life. And the poet persona is ensuring that seed is not corrupted, that seed is still planted on a fertile ground. So the lamentation we have in Afro-Rococo is an extended and internalized form of individualism, consequence of the post-modernist sociocultural failure. But of course, we also come to the politics. As I said earlier on, there's another poem that catches my attention so much, so powerful. The poem is about Africa and Nigeria. Now, Nigeria, okay, Africa, of course, Nigeria, Africa. So, Africa generally has a stooge of foreign investors as a copy of foreign economic standards. We all know that one of the compartments of neocolonization is the economy of Africa, and how foreign investment in Africa are another form of colonization. I remember this poem by J.P. Clark, Lagos Island. Oh, that poem is about, I think, the Lebanese or some kind of foreign investors housing the settlers of Lagos Island. And we now have poverty where the land was once rich. So the paradox of socio-economic reforms, right? So that when project the paradox of socio-economic reforms. Let me read that particular point. Am I permitted
Yes,
to
you are.
read from?
Yes, you are.
Let me read from that particular collection. Okay, I found it. Poem number 89.
Okay.
Poem number 89. It says, Africa, the human farm, whose best produce feeds the hungry industries in the West.
Okay.
Africa, the human farm, whose best produce feeds the hungry industries in the West.
Yeah.
I love this poem so much that the moment I read it, I remembered Jari Dangira's Excel, where the poet says, we have traded competitively perfect until you came, Polish goodwill from high order. Then the vaccine from the lake bought the cow shed. Plants to get water. Come on, I think the most important work of socio-economic division of Africa as an offshoot of colonization will be from the Kenyans. The Kenyan writer has represented that socio-economic failure of Africa better than any other region of Africa. Of course, the different regions of Africa as represented in modern Africa, or different regions of Africa have their issues, their defining political and cultural lamentations. But Kenya is notorious, it's famous, notable for the economic degradation of Africa by the West. So, if we Afro-focus, after having given the personal, the individual, I think I should also address the subtle psychoanalytic undercurrent of that poem, of that collection as well. Where we have issue of the conflict between the shadow, the animals, and the personal. But we come to that later. So this particular part where we have the lamentation of Africa, the Africa, a farm that feeds the hungry industries of the West, I think we still come to the Afro-pessimist apologia. The pessimism of Africa not being soluble, not being solvent to address the financial and economical problems of our citizens. So one of the layers of Afro-pessimism will be the inability of Africa to attend to the basic needs of the citizen. And this is what we want to find here. Africa, a farm that feeds the hungry industry of the West. Now, if the farm feeding the hungry industry, this farm is not feeding its own belly, not feeding the belly of our own citizens, which is what I think is the slavery, the suffering the idiocy of governmental administration in terms of budgetary plans or budgetary innovation, whatever budgetary policy Africa has, it is still a great outflows to the financial capacity of the citizens. And as we all know, poverty in Africa is a structure on its own, just like it is in Europe. Remember I said the fund is personal but also universal. Just like you have it in Europe. Poverty is a system on its own, is a structure on its own. Taking it from the 18th century writers, the 18th century writers, the likes of Samuel Johnson, London poem. London. The another 18th century writer who was, I think, Jonathan Swift, the creation of City Shower. These are poems that indirectly examine the business partnership of the rich. That politics is nothing but a club and curve of rich men. So a club and curve of rich men disguise things as public interest. So it's nothing but a protection of personal interest at the expense of public interest. So this kind of poem, Africa, a farm that feeds the hungry industry of the West, reminds us of the socio-economic failure of Africa. But socio-economic failure will be a big word, so to speak. It will be a dramaticalization of the basic issue, which is what? Poverty, hunger, and disease. Poverty, hunger, and disease. And if we trace these issues deep down, we arrive at another road. In fact, the beauty of this poem is how the brevity of those poems, the brevity of the collection, leads us into tunnels of meaning, layers of meaning. In fact, what you can call a counterpart of ideology, so to speak. So the issue of poverty, the common man not feeling well, even when we read this poem, I think Homeless Not Hopeless by Shola Wonibi, his memory starts right. So these are poems that lament the economic condition of the masses. The economic condition of the masses. In other words, Afro-Rococo is a poem that wittily addresses the meeting points of cultural, social, and political depletion of society, whether Africa or Europe. Of course, it happens in Europe too. Odion Fremont tells us in his poem, Indian Bomb, that it cannot be darker in the East than it is in the West. The notion of empire is the same everywhere. The same way J.P. Clark tells us in his poem Casualties that we are all casualties, all tagging have had cases and the passion. And John Donne also tells us in his No Man is an Island, says, do not seek to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. Says every man's death diminishes me, for I am part of the continent. Therefore, do not seek to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. So there is a universality of economic incapacitation, not only in Africa, same way in Europe. When we read America, They Are America by J.P. Clark, a memoir, we see the expose of the African intellectual snitching in on the so-called superiority complex of Europe to have achieved that economic status where every man lives by the dream or every man lives by their ambition. But it is not so. Even in Europe, we have social classes where you have the rich and the poor. And right now, observers have said the classes there are not even three. That is not about the rich, the middle class, and the poor. We only have two classes: the rich versus the poor.
Yeah.
So this kind of poem, Africa, a farm that feeds the hungry, industries in the West, is a biting criticism, a poetic lamentation of the economic incapacitation of Africa. And I think I remember one saying by one writer that if we do not handle our independence well, the colonizers will come back as investors. And they have. They have come back as investors. They are investing. I remember this poem by J.P. Clark, Here Nothing Works. Doctor, you know that poem, sir? Here Nothing Works by J.P. Clark.
Yes.
Here nothing works, services taken for granted elsewhere, break down or do not get started at all when introduced to our land, which is no different from other land. So nothing works. All the industries have been privatized.
Okay.
It is just the government siphoning and building generational wealth on the wealth. Pastor, am I still on?
Yes, you're on. Let's go on. Let's go ahead. We are still listening to Mr. Kende Coloring Show. Review the...
I'm still on, sir. Could you please give me a minute, sir?
Yeah, please go on.
So I was saying, I was addressing the economic incapacitation of Africa. Then there is another poem, another African lamentation about the government, the first person saying they will wait till another government comes. I think that now brings us to the waiting for Godot motif. Yeah. The waiting for Godot that never arrived, that never came. I think the same thing in Africa, we are still waiting for Godot. That is why I believe so much that this poem is an important work of contemporary African literature. It should be read by anyone who wants to understand the genesis, the transition, and the transcendentalism of African poetry. So I made a post one time about transition and transcendence being two touchstones from which we should begin to situate the perspective of the artist. And apart from that, I have made short posts like that about what is happening in African literature, how a demographic of writers is not attuned to certain things. They are doing well, but I still think that there are issues we have missed, which is the fact that the thread of idea that defines African literature needs to be seized by the gods. It is like that idiom that says taking the bull by the horn. Okay, so I move on. Another poem from the collection. So this is poem number 102. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so the poem says, there is no way that you can work with children without smearing yourself. It is like playing in the mud. When I read this poem, I don't even know what I felt. But I felt many things. And there is no way you can work with children without smearing yourself. It is like playing in the mud. You know, even from the days of Jesus Christ, to have addressed a person as a child, Jesus Christ calling his disciples little children, when he met them, I think, trying to fish again after everything he had taught them. When he resurrected and he came back, he met them playing with the idea of going to fish, and he called them little children. So the idea of child in literature is contextual and something highly sensitive. And because of the universality of this poem, when you say there's no way you play with children without smearing, it can be in the work environment. The idea of children can be in a work environment, And I think here now we come to the exploitation of labor, which is one of the issues we find in Wilson Gibson's history. Okay, what I'm trying to establish is this poem referring to a crop of individuals as children, that you can't play with without smearing yourself. We still come to the adaptation, that there's no way you want to do it without affecting yourself. There's nothing you want to do. You can't escape from this issue. And what issue would that be? It would be the reality of living with the defeated sociocultural norm of humanity, achieving the status of humanity. Hello, am I still on?
Yes, you're on.
Okay, so I think I should round it up now, right?
No problem, you can.
Okay, so I will address some of the themes of this poem. Individualism, of course, is a major theme in the poem. Then we have the issue of postmodernist and the kind of philosophical anxiety. Now, as I have noted earlier on, this poem is essentially based on the African value system, especially based on the African value system, whereupon the poet observes the society as broken into several intractable parts, where you have the individual embroiled in many wrongs at the same time. So many things are wrong at the same time with the African society. And that kind of African society is one that is not taking its clue. Yeah, that society that is not taking its clue from the foundation of cultural sanctity that the African society is famous or defined by. So African society is defined by a kind of cultural sanctity, and that is why the poem goes to axiology. There is only that the discourse has not essentially featured proverbs and all of that, but it has featured age-old wisdom, re-expressed, retold in a way that an informed reader will connect with. So that is why I believe that out of the many themes of this poem, from the personal to the political or the socially hinged ones, I think the most important will be the individualism of the African child. So we come back to child now. The individuality of the African child who is observing his society and does not want to get involved, does not want to smear himself, does not want to, affect his own behavior and character. And let us also remember that the issue of behavior and character, moral compass, the moral compass of seeing right, where there is another idea in African poetry where morality is lauded as a kind of compass into a bright future. We see this in poems by Niyi Oshundare, who wrote Inurere by Niyi Oshundare, then Akitipe Common by Niyi Oshundare, then other works like that. Some of his poems written for junior secondary students, they are poems that are built on the didacticism of the African society at large. So we come to the mind of the poet persona in the poem. It is lamentation, quite alright. We see someone who the mind as a seed that's really corrupted. The poet persona is trying to save their head, trying to do that issue of head and water. So the poet persona is trying to be human in an inhuman world. Let me put it that way. Someone is trying to be human in an inhuman and inhumane world, work environment, immediate society, immediate environment, political atmosphere. Many things are wrong at the same time. So how does the individual salvage their self? How does the individual salvage their moral self? What route, what route is to be taken in a bid to salvage oneself from the ocean of sociocultural depletion? And that, I think, is the lamentation and angst of poet persona in Afro Rococo. Thank you very much, Dr. Efu. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kende, for Lorenzo. I hope I get your name correctly. What's the meaning of Kende? What's the meaning of
Kende? Means the last person to come, something like that. I'm a twin. So I'm the second of the twins.
Wow, that's amazing. And how about for Lorenzo? Does it have a meaning?
Lorenzo means entrusted into God's care, God's protection.
Wow, interesting.
It's an essentialist expression to say that it's only God that can take care of this person.
Yeah, so when you look at the meaning of Florencio, how has it applied to your life from birth till this moment?
Important question, sir. Important question, Dr. I have seen God manifest in several ways. God has always been with me, because let me take it from when I finished secondary school. From when I finished secondary school till this hour, there has been no parental guidance in terms of So I've been doing it myself from university, from my DD1 university to this hour. So it has been God, right? Then another aspect will be how my mother taught me faith. I remember I think I was 11 or 12 years old when my mother wanted me to undertake a kind of spiritual exercise in our church that was exclusive for adults. She wanted me to do it because we are, my brother and I, the twins, we are our only sons, the only boy child. So she has always made us realize that we have a long way to go, and that journey cannot be undertaken without God. So she has always, quote unquote, pushed us into doing something difficult, anything difficult, believing that we will still do it. I remember, and I'll rest my case on this note. I remember one time my brother and I were in a kind of condition or situation that needed, parental attention or family attention, and because there was no one, anytime we called our mom on phone, she would say, you are boys, you are men, nobody will come to save you, you have to do it yourself. So from that time, my brother and I began to see how God is just paramount, that with or without family, God is paramount. And I thank God. I've always been in His care. God has always been there for us.
Okay, so do you write poetry yourself?
Sir?
Do you write poetry yourself?
Yes, sir. I write poetry.
Do you have a collection yet?
Yes, I have a collection that I wrote for my undergrad thesis as my final year project.
Okay. So has it been published?
No, I haven't been published. I haven't been published.
Okay. Thank you for the review of Afro Rococo. You know, the idea of Afro Rococo at the first level is to domesticate the Rococo poetry within the context of African poetry, and so without actually losing the qualities taken from the European origins of the poem. So when you look at it from that perspective, you see how the personal is quite important, because you see how the personal is quite important because in Rococo poetry, we do not actually remove the individual from the art, in the sense that if you are talking about the whole essence of Rococo poetry, we are talking about the aesthetics of the arts object, that which means beauty. We are talking about the pleasurable moments of life. But you see, when we get to Africa, yes, we do laugh, we do get happy, as you rightly said. We have humor has come to stay here, but then it's a kind of dark humor. It's a kind of dark humor, and that is exactly what is depicted in the poem. In fact, you talked about the postmodernist nature of the poems, and one of the important concepts in postmodernism is dark humor, which is the idea that we actually laugh at our tragedies, okay, make fun of our tragedies. Okay, so that's what you come across mostly in the collection. Another thing, that I would have loved you to mention is the motif of pain. Did you notice the motif of pain in the poem?
Yes, motif of pain. Yes, for pain.
Yes. So because then, pain then becomes a kind of a literary resource deployed by the poet to make sense of not only suffering at the individual level, but suffering at the level of the collective. And so that's quite interesting. But I would like you to comment on this point particularly before we move on to something else. It's on page 108. It says, "Putting pen on paper is a dangerous adventure. Only the most courageous get to undertake it." All right, welcome back.
Dr. T.
Yeah, welcome back. Sorry for the interruption.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so we were discussing Rococo poetry aesthetics itself. We were talking about the aesthetics of pain as part of the collection's linguistic or content resource, and I was at the point I wanted to comment on a poem that speaks to the art of poetry itself. How would I call it? One of the hazards of being a writer in any society, not only in Nigeria, not only in Africa. So the poem says, "Putting pen on paper is a dangerous adventure. Only the most courageous get to undertake it." Did you read that poem, and what did you think of it?
Yes, sir. I read it, sir.
Yeah. So what's your take on it? Given the issue of the safety of writers and even the safety of people we call voices in our society.
So my take on that point is that the writer, there are two layers to it. The first one is that the writer has the great commitment to address social problems without mincing words and without compromising certain ethical standards, right? So the writer has the duty of telling the truth. The writer is a truth teller. So the writer is responsible for tracking what is going on in society, responsible for telling truth to the face of power. Now that now leads on to the second layer, where Neo Shindari once said that the African writer has no option but to be political.
Yeah.
Right? So to be political as a writer means that you will face the. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear you? Go on.
Yeah, so to be political as a writer means in the process or in a bid of speaking truth to the face of power, the writer is already representing the interests of the public. And in that regard, the writer may face some challenges, but that shouldn't deter or discourage the writer from representing the interests of society. So it takes courage to write. One, from the point of view of writing process, because writing, it is said, is 5% inspiration, 95% perspiration. So it takes courage to write. Writing is a whole lot. Then the second thing is that as a writer, there is that social responsibility of telling the truth, regardless of the situation and circumstance.
Thank you very much. Then, still on the art of writing poetry itself, on page 72, you have the poem, "The poet's duty is to remove the smile from false faces and move on." Did you see that poem?
What page, sir? What page?
72, 72.
Okay.
72, I'm reading from page 72. "The poet's duty is to remove the smile from false faces and move on." So what do you think of that poem in relation to, first of all, the function of poetry in Africa, in Nigeria,
Okay.
With the function that poetry is supposed to serve? What does it mean within that context to start with?
Okay. When I read this line, the poet's duty is to remove the smile from false faces and move on. Now, I remember what Soyinka faced during Abacha's regime, whereupon Abacha said that's what in his memoir, you must test what I done, where Abacha said that's Wole Soyinka is meant to be a poet, but all he does is throw bombs everywhere. That's the work of the writer. So, and Neo Shindari's new memoir, which says truth is trouble. So the poet's duty of removing smile from false faces is to tell the truth that will make even the political junta uncomfortable, because truth, they say, is bitter, and whether directed to the politician or not. When a poet is truly committed to the ethical standard of telling the truth, those who do not meet that standard, the false faces, we find it a threat. So the poet directly or indirectly is a threat to the forces of social failure.
Okay, so before that page, you have another poem, page 71. Page 71, if you can go there. I would like to read a poem there, and then I want you to comment on it as the reviewer, what you thought of it when you saw it. Still on the art of poetry writing. Those who do not write for prizes write for truth. Those who do not sell their pen write without fear. Those who do not write for fame defend the poor. The truthful soup does not require many meaty metaphors to garnish it. Truth is blessed with her own internal beauty. What do you think of that?
The idea of writing for prize is something serious. So when I say those who do not write for prize write for truth, it means that truth does not need to appeal to the sentiment of a group. Truth should not appeal to the sentiment of a group. It's just like the misrepresentation of people's history. So it is quite criminal to misrepresent a person's history. So when we examine this fact with respect to what Chinua Achebe has done in Things Fall Apart, writing back to the center, representing the true Africa, exposing what the white man must have missed before he went with that Conradian definition of Africa. So that is it. So not writing for prize is to write for truth, and not selling the pen is to write without fear. That is, a poet or a writer has no business fraternizing themselves with those who pervert society. So the writer has the duty to call out those social subversions, as I have noted earlier on. So those who do not write for fame defend the poor. Yes, the writer should not mince words. The writer should not mince words in telling the truth about the failure of governance. And the last line that says, truthful does not require many meaty metaphors to garnish it. It means that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. It's just like what Dennis Brutus says in one of his poems, that states the fact the way it is, right? State the fact and let it sing. So a truthful poem does not quote and unquote confuse or lead the reader astray. It is a whole lot of diligent process in ensuring that the truth is told. So truth does not need any embellishment. Poetry, if a poem is true, if a writer is true to their art, they do not need any embellishment.
All right. So let's talk about how poetry, what you feel poetry should be like in order to properly represent contemporary Nigerian realities. In your own opinion, you are free to say what you believe poetry should be like so that it can properly capture contemporary Nigerian realities.
Okay. First.
Okay. So the comment on those who write for. Okay. So what I think about African poetry, contemporary poetry.
Yes. What do you think contemporary African poetry should be like in order to properly depict realities in Nigeria?
Okay, so I said first and foremost that I don't think there's a manual for how the poem should go. What I only advocate is the true representation of the situation. That is, a poet should properly dictate the social angles from which the problem has come. So about what the poem should be a rounded and unembellished account of society. For example, if the African poet keeps writing about if all the African poets, if all the contemporary poets keep writing is the tragedy, the pain, in a way that subverts the reality, I think that will be missing the mark of poetry being an amalgam of different observations. Poetry being a build-up from several constituents of existing ideology. Did you hear that, sir?
Yes, I can hear you. Go on.
So there is no manual for it, but the African poets should try as much as they can to make their poem represent the different constituents of the African poetry ideology. So poetry cannot exist in isolation of geographical reality. Quite all right, but it will not always be a scratching the surface thingy. So scratching the surface, only representing imaginary, surreal, whatever kind of pain as we have it. It should also properly account for. It should be a build-up. It should be truly representative of the formally ideological constituent of African writing. That's it. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kende. Which poem from the collection would you like to read for us?
Hello, sir.
Which poem from the collection would you like to read for us?
From this Afro Koko, right?
Yes.
Okay, I would like to read poem number 70. It says, I sowed seeds of love in the farm of affection. I slept, woke up, and the seeds have sprouted. I slept, I woke up, the seeds have blossomed into a plant of pleasant life, full of hope and great promise. I slept again, and when I awoke, my love has become the yam eaten by the goats of time. I mourned over my unwatchfulness.
That's funny. Yeah, so you see, for me, that poem fits into the Rococo framework in poetry, because one, it talks about love, and then it depicts images of affection, images, pastoral images are depicted in the poem as well. But then that motif of tragedy still plays out at the end of the day, making it a postmodernist poem in the way it depicts the vagaries of existence and all that plot twist that defies our happy ending, our sense of happy ending. So that's it. But what's your take on it?
My take on it is just another layer of despair. Another layer of despair of humanity. Love is something human. Human nature. Love is just a kind of romanticist feature or phenomenon of the human life. So when we read a poem, or when I read a poem now where somebody plants the seed of love, and waking up one day, that seed has the seed has grown into a plant now eaten by goats of love. I think it still comes back to the kind of way thought of friendship, the theme of betrayal, something that questions one's moral in comes to the realization that modern society does not reward good or does not reward kind-heartedness. Maybe someone has been very kind to a fault, or someone being good to a fault. So one of the issues is the despair over the character of humanity, because obviously what has happened to the poet persona in this poem is betrayal and something done to them, evil done to them as a reward from someone they have been good to. So that's universal idea like that.
All right, thank you, sir. But one thing I want to draw your attention to is the fact that this love that's become yam. Of course, that's metaphor. Is eaten by the goats of time, which again draws attention to time as a powerful force in human relationship. Time as, at the end of the day, a decider of whatever happens between people, and how important it is in human affection and all forms of human relationship. So that too is very important, because you normally see people, get into a relationship that whether it is a political relationship or economic relationship or marriage relationship or any form of relationship, at the end of the day, that relationship might begin well, and then there's how the passage of time affects human relationship. I think that is what this poem is trying to draw our attention to, in relation to human action, of course, because time has influence depending on how we act in our relationship. And then the persona actually blames himself for being unwatchful, and I think that this is what happens sometimes. People blame themselves for things that they are not accountable for, things that they cannot even control, because he has already said that time is such a force that it can change the trajectory of any human relationship. But then the person finds a way to say that whatever has gone wrong in the relationship has happened because of a mistake or an action that he must have taken that he should not have. And that's what it says when it says, I mourned over my unwatchfulness. And there's also the motive of sleep in the poem. I don't know whether you've noticed it. Right from the beginning, the person has been sleeping, and then when he wakes up, something changes in the relationship. What does that really mean? What does that really mean? Is it a marker of time, or is it part of the action that leads to the failure of the relationship itself? Sleeping and waking up. Is it a matter of time?
I think it suggests, in my opinion, it suggests trust. When you sleep, to have slept on that kind of situation means the persona trusted the object of their affection. Trust, wow. But that trust now being betrayed. Okay. Or one can draw it from the biblical allusion of somebody sleeping and the enemy coming to sow tares among wheat, Yeah. So the idea of sleep is just trust, and the trust now getting betrayed.
Wow, I like your perspective. It's quite interesting. You're actually sticking to your theme of betrayal, which is quite interesting. You know. So of course that's the beauty of poetry, because then it's part of the things that endear me to literature, because in literature you are free to subjectively form your own opinion about a particular work of art, and if you're able to convince someone that is what that work means, then it stands, right? So I like the perspective that that we are forming out of this point, but because of time, we really have to go so that I can take on Ridwan and the DJ still on this. I think I really like your depth, your deep understanding of poetry, and I really thank you. And I know that you come on Planeyo Book Circle again, because we need knowledgeable reviewers like you to take on books that we discuss here. So I would really like to thank you. What are your plans for the future in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you hope to be?
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. And in the next couple of years, I should be on my way to getting my degree, underdegree, master's, PhD. I would like to be a lecturer.
Okay. So what do you advise writers who want to write poetry? What should they pay attention to?
I think writers who want to write African poetry should begin to read deeply, not just read far and wide, but to read deeply, to read the important works, so that they can also come up with the inspiration of all poets.
Okay, no problem. So thank you so much, Mr. Kende.
Thank you, sir, Dr. Etim. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, do have a happy time in Lagos.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking to Mr. Kende Folarunsho, the reviewer of Afro-Rococo. He has shown himself to be a knowledgeable mind when it comes to poetry analysis, and I really thank him. We will shortly take on Mr. Ridwan Adedeji after this break.
Are you looking for a place to have your quality printing done in Uyo? Look no further than Planeyo Publishers for your quality direct imaging printing. Our services include graphic design, photocopy, color photocopy, typing and printing, lamination, flex and poster, book publishing, wedding and burial programs, ID card printing, passport printing, photo enlargement. You can also make your gifts more valuable when you brand them. Let's brand your gift items and souvenirs. Visit Planeyo Publishers at number 2 Eka Street off Ikodekpene Road, Uyo, Akwa Ibom State, or call 0802-7898-705, 002-789-8705. Planeyo Publishers, publishing your dream works.
All right, so welcome back. We are still at Planeyo Book Circle. This is the 9th edition of Planeyo Book Circle, and we thank God. We've just spoken with Mr. Kende Folarunsho, who reviewed Ayoitam's Afro-Rococo. I'm now about connecting with Ridwan Adedeji for his review of the same poetry collection. Hello, Mr. Ridwan Adedeji. How are you doing today?
Good evening, sir.
Welcome to Planeyo Book Circle.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Can you tell us about yourself and what you do?
Okay, my name is Ridwan Adedeji.
All right.
My name, sir.
Yes, what do you do?
Well, I have a literature analysis website where I simplify literary texts, mostly African literary texts, for my literary audience, for my audience. That's basically what I do. And most recently, my friends and I started a Yoruba profiling a website where we profile Yoruba literary text and then Yoruba literary authors too. So that's basically what I do. I don't think much.
So what's the name of your website for the poetry analysis?
Well, the poetry analysis website is Literature Party. Literature Party with the URL literatureparty.com.ng.
Literature Party is actually quite popular, I would say.
Sir?
I said Literature Party is actually quite popular, I would say.
Thank you.
So how did you achieve that level of success in literature analysis? Because you don't just do poetry analysis, but literature analysis generally.
Okay, I think my background helps a lot. As a teen, my mother used to buy classical literature text. So my mother used to buy classical literature text for me. And at some point, I think she thought The Old Man and the Maiden. I think I was 11 at that point. The Old Man and the Maiden by Ferdinand Oyono. So when I read the text, I also stole from my father's library. I stole with no child at that point. So I discovered that I like reading notebooks, I like reading plays and all that. So sometime in 2020, I wrote an article of Let Me Die Alone and one other text. And by the end of the year, I think I wrote that around July. By the end of the year, just about 5 or so posts, I realized that I had gotten 50,000 visits from 5 posts. And I thought, I think I can do this differently. And that was why I had to start Literature Party as a proper website in March 2021.
That's quite interesting. Can we say that you made a lot of money from that venture?
Well, at least I would say for me it is better than it is much better than working in a private.
Wow, that's amazing. So what actually gives you joy when you look at Literature Party?
Well, I think the promise of what it would become is what gives me joy. Because now I know I have not even done anything. So there are a lot of African texts people are not talking about. There are a lot of African literary texts people are not talking about that are not out there. You would only find the analysis because they are not in demand. So you want to fill that gap. That gap is what I want to fill. And anytime I look at it, I still feel as if I'm not doing enough yet. I'm not doing enough.
Okay, so what kind of foundation, educational and otherwise, as well as mentorship, allowed you to achieve what you have achieved today with Literature Party and all your other ventures?
Well, I attended Planeyo University, where I got a degree in English language. And currently I'm doing my master's in still English language, but I'm actually close. I've actually have that academic issue. I have always loved literature, but language is my area of specialization. Then talking about mentorship, there has been a lot. You almost said what I'm saying. It's been a very good thing.
Yeah, interesting. So you've read Afro Rococo, and
exactly.
we would like to hear what your review should be on it at the moment. So you have the floor. Your review of Afro Rococo before we continue with the discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Afro Rococo a very unique text. Yeah, there are a lot of things to talk about in the text. Should we talk about the theme? Should we talk about the style? Should we talk about how how the poetry collection engages the society? So there are a lot of things to talk about the poetry collection. And speaking of the style, one thing I realized is that one noticeable thing, the most noticeable thing about the text, the poetry collection in general, is the graphic style. Some of the poems, a lot of the poems are written in form of epic grams. They are written, they are humorous, and then they project heavy issues using that humor. So these are some of the things but I am not going to look at the poetry collection from the angle of the style. I want to engage it from the thematic angle. The thematic angle. I think when I started the poems in the collection, I realized that there are about 105 poems in the collection. And looking at them, I realized that they engage about social issues. You have some talking about the role of the writer in the society. You have others talking about the art itself. And then, of course, the hypocrisy of politicians, poverty. So there are a lot of things. Even marriage is there. I was really aware of marriage, and then I saw a point where the poet personnel was saying that being in a prison is better than being in marriage. So I found that humorous. So to find a lot of these things. And before I move on to the thematic angle, which I will be focusing on, speaking of the style, the epigrammic style in the poem, in the poetry collection, one thing I noticed is that the reason for this style, is not unconnected with the social media era, etc. We are in the generation where we have this short attention span. So basically, when people are scrolling on social media, the thing is too lengthy. One is missing one side, no one is going to read it, so don't even think about it. So I think the style of the poem could have, most have been informed by this, this reality of the digital age. So I think that is our style of it. And speaking of the poems, I haven't read all the poems. My favorite poem is the poem. The poetry collection is the Penny Dash. That's my favorite poem. That's my favorite poem in the. I will say why I like the poem later, because of how it relates with our political reality. And speaking of this, the poem is the major pillar of this poem, this poetry collection is the critique of failed leadership. So it critiques failed leadership, poverty, and then of course systemic or exploitation in the African society. So apart from the fact that it looked into the post-colonial African society, it also talked about some universal themes too. So when we talk about universal themes, you have things like death. In respect to that poem on, to that tribute to Chadwick Boseman. So you have that poem too, and then there's the poetry of death, etc. So you have these poems in the collection. But let's start from the socio-political angle, how it critiques our socio-political reality. So I'll go back to the Conti-Dash. So in the Conti-Dash, the poet personnel calls politicians political comedians. So who is roasted on the streets during elections to trick the poor into voting for them. So, and there is a catch here. They will come every 4 years to meet calls on the street to try to reach the poor that we, as you said, with the masses and all that. Then after the election, they go back to their respective high offices, and then they snap on their own beat. So I actually respect the fact that the poet person have played upon the word on. I love the way the poets played upon corn. You have corn beef, you have corn in the sense of make something, and then you have corn in the sense of treating the masses into voting for them. So in the words of the poet personnel, you have he calls them part-time corn pickers. They eat corn once in 4 years to trick the masses into believing that they too are the poor. But they and their offspring snack on corned beef the rest of the year. So that actually shows us how the political hypocrisy, the sick that we have in our society, and for the fact that it is working, then so that's just one thing I really like that poem. I like that poem, just like I told you with my favorite. And one thing is when the first thing that came, the first picture that came to my mind was Fire and she while canvassing for votes during the humanitarian election, eating roasted meats and all that. That's the first picture. And the other picture, while I was growing up, my dad told me a particular story of an academic who became a banker and then wanted to pivot towards politics. So, and in the course of campaigning, people were like, this man said English is too much. He's not going to relate with our plight. So, to prove them wrong, he went to their respective villages and started drinking water, drinking their stream water and all that, eat their food, their purple and everything. You won't believe that at the end of the whole thing, at the end of that particular one, he went home and used the right drugs. Because that kind of food, he's not used to that kind of food, he's only pretending. So that's the kind of image, that kind of image is when put in my mind. Then, still talking about leaders, he also lambasts leaders, like the figure you have in the vulture, who speaks high up to spew lies. So that's another thing. And when I think of that, I see that the dichotomy between the leader and the left. So I see that why go between that's why go between the both classes, the both classes of the government. So I do that thing. And it reminds me of the allegorical giraffe in New York Race, the leader and the left. And one of the reasons, or let's say the major reason is rejected by the animals in the forest is that it has no neck. So which means it's not going to the giraffe will not be able to engage with what the masses are undergoing. So that's one thing, that's what I'm able to believe with. And the other thing I am able to derive from this poetry collection is this should I say persistent green dream we have in our society. So and that is illustrated in it is illustrated in how the poet describes Africa as a human farm. Yes, you have this line. Africa, the human farm, whose best produce feeds the hungry industries in the West. So I like the fact that the poet persona clarified human farm, because if that's the word human is not there, it would have given a literal interpretation. But what we have is very obvious that the West is taking our bet. And bringing the whole thing back down to Nigeria. If we have to come down to Nigeria, I would say I would use the example of Ahmed Jerima's Carfield's last game. In that test, it is something $1,000. So any eligible person would take.
No problem.
Collier, share your music, share your love.
Mr. Urwan, please, we had an interruption. You are connected back. Could you please continue?
Okay, so any sensible person will take a $80,000 job in comparison to $116 job in Nigeria. So because of the financial incentive and the deplorable living condition in Nigeria, a lot of our best brains are leaving. Our best brains are leaving the country for greener pasture, and that is basically one thing. The poem. I mean, this poem captures. And beyond that, you have the fisherman's song. The fisherman's song, which captures the social realities. Social realities of the working class. So you have the imagery of a fisherman who battles with polluted water, catches nothing, and is still exploited by oppressive officials. Well, the name Mr. Gendam, I don't know if that is the correct pronunciation. Mr. Gendam, the name is not, the import of that name is not lost on me. I know it's a foreign name. So, it in essence re-echoes the colonial perspective of Ingrid Wationgo. So in this poem, you have the fisherman throws his net into a polluted sea. Mr. Gendam demands a costly tax. The fisherman presents his empty net. Mr. Gendam laughs at the empty net. So essentially, it describes the endless and then of course the fruitless toil of the poor. So the poor would keep working to keep being taxed. So that is the kind of thing we have in this. Then you have who die here. We go there to die. We go there to die. In the case of we go there to die, it focuses on neo-colonial migration, this migration madness, and how everyone is running outside the country, and we can't blame them. We can't blame them with the who is not the people who to begin with. So this poem laments the tragic fate of Africans who cross the ocean to the west. How they mocking the treasure of their continent, only for them to find that their, should I say, cultural heritage has been eroded along the way. So, and the poet's use of a two-ethnic masquerade in this regard seems to echo something that we have in Vanity by Venerable Dio. So where you are neither here nor there and all that. So it seems to echo that two-headed masquerade. You lost your culture, your culture has been erased, and the people you are going to meet, they do not accept you as one of theirs too. So I read, and Another thing, another text that comes very close is yes, it is written by Ferdinand Oyono, and that's the Outboy. You know, when Fonti at the beginning of the Outboy says, "What are we black men who are French?" So that is a kind of two masqueraded masquerade the poet persona is trying to describe here. And moving on, the poet's persona also, the poet also echoes the concept of art itself. So, what art is and the place the poet occupies in the grander scheme of things in his society. So, it's basically it basically looks into the role a poet should occupy. So the poet just watch as you should just watch the society go and really to the poet, or should the poet use his craft? Should the poet use his craft to speak to power? So that is what we have in what is art, where the poet speaks truth. Where the poet talked about speaking truth to power. And this is in tandem with, this whole concept is in tandem with Neo Sundari's notion, that famous notion of the writer as writer, where he delved into what the role of a writer in society, that the role of a writer should be to correct the anomalies, the maladies in the society using his craft. So that is one thing. And okay, I think there is a particular, there are some lines that caught my eye here. So what is poetry? What is poetry if it does not charge to shatter new colonial chains? What is a bad? If it turns bad by selling its lines for a few worthless naira note. So basically he's saying that a poet in a dysfunctional society has no business with being compromised. He has no business with being silent, because silence in the face of the silence is not allowed in the face of tyranny. You have to speak to power. That is the kind of thing he's saying. So a poet should not be compromised again. And talking about this new colonial, the poet's sense of new colonial change, he's basically saying that, well, we've been granted independence, but have we really got independence? So I think it is in tandem with this man's book, Ngo Wationgo's Machigari. So in Machigari, for example, you see a character, you see Machigari, the allegorical Machigari going around, oh, well, we've gained independence, I fought for this independence and all that, so this is my house. Only for him to realize that these white colonialists have been replaced by black colonialists in food. So that is the kind of situation we find there. We live in a rentier economy, and the kind of leaders we have, they are good thinkers of Western powers. Then that is for what is that, by the way. Then you have the poet at Evans State, where the poet focuses on the reward of poetic integrity. So he's basically saying that when a poet does what he's supposed to do, he would get his reward. So in this regard, a poet is granted entry to paradise because he never sold his pen to the highest bidder. So I think I would see this as a sequel. I would see the poet that opens the end of what is art. I would see it as a sequel because what is art questions the role of a poet and directly and indirectly says what the role of a poet should be in a dysfunctional and broken society. So the poet at every stage does go on to show that and the reward may not necessarily be a material paradise, but it will come in form of that peace of mind that I have done my part in changing the society, in addressing the maladies, in effecting change in the society. So that is and it's still talking about the concept of art itself. So the poet also describes the creative process involved in that interconnection between the poet, his muse, and words and all that in dawn song, and then of course ballads. So I think I'll take this line there. Okay, it says poetry is the art of capturing in words the mind. Okay, poetry is the art of capturing in words what the mind has perceived in pictures. So that is basically so. When people define poetry, through the lens of Allan Poe, William Wordsworth, I would just say, 2022 says poetry is the art of capturing in words what the mind has perceived in pictures. Then, moving beyond, we talk about the socio-political reality, the poetry collection capture. We talk about the art itself, and then we have law. You have a portrayal of law, you have a portrayal of marriage, and then of course betrayal. But one thing that strikes me the most is the portrayal of marriage. How the poet persona portrays marriage in this respect. So you have that romantic illusionment. So, and in this regard, he continues with his use of dark humor in the Happy Prisoner song. So, and here he tries to equate marriage to a literal prison. In fact, he says that a prison is better than marriage. He says a prison is better than marriage. So you have okay. It says the prison is a better place than being built to tax collectors in the guise of nuclear confinement. Where outside the country has changed, wants your money, but failing that she will pay you. So I think what is trying to say that he's trying to tell us about how Christian marriage, how they have become transgender, and give me more and have more than you the happy personal story. That's very simple. So if you want and you just come out, you instead of laughing because the reality of the love of a married the reality of love in pure bad single speed and and he goes on later to pray, authentic connection. He even declares that the women, that women generally are the source of the art. So that just tell you that the happy personal song, it is not a derision of women. It's only talking about the relationship between men and women in that nuptial commitment. So that is what we have here. Then you have they are not your friends. They are not your friends. And if they are not your friends, he's trying to portray the danger of toxic acquaintance. How some people they are not your friends because of how they behave towards you, probably directly or indirectly, probably in public or in private. How they flatter you in person and demonize you in secret. So, the lines I brought out here, it says they are not your friends who flatter you in presence but demonize you in your absence. They are not your friends who remember you but forget you when it is time to pray. Well, I don't want to impart too much, but I think I can take a lucky guess and say this particular poem is coming from very deep place. That feeling of being betrayed by those the poet personnel, the poet personnel or the poet himself that as friends, because it's coming from a deep place. And I like the fact that he was depicting their adds to that rhythmic thing. Then in the previous review, the words the convener of this program mentioned the motive of pain. So the motive of pain is also there to find that I think it is most explicit in the threnody for Bushman. It is very explicit in the threnody for Bushman. And the death of Chadwick Boseman, it's a very sad thing. Everyone felt bad because of how he has been portrayed as a Black Panther, what that figure is symbolizes. So because we come to see him as the glory of a black bride. So this when shows that motive of pain. It shows that motive of pain. So to kill two birds with a stone. He also pays tribute to lost heroes and innocent in this section. He pays tribute to them too. Then moving on, still on the motive of pain, then the instability of death and all that. You have the falling bed too. You have the falling bed. So the falling bed pays tribute in following the antecedent of the third for Postman. It pays tribute to a female pilot. So it's more like a tragic epitaph. It's more like an epitaph. And in this, it talks about the unfairness. We know that life generally is unfair. Whether you care, whether you present it in the form of religion. In my own religion, for example, everything that happens to us, we come to see that God ordained and all that. But naturally, life is not fair. Life is not fair. So, let me digress a bit. The other time I was reading Allah is Not Obliged by Ahmad Kuruma, a very popular Ivorian writer. So, in Allah is Not, the full title is actually Allah is Not Obliged to I can't remember the full title, but Allah is Not Obliged is a short form. So, in Allah is Not Obliged, you have child soldiers, you have child soldiers killing themselves, you have people, a few people who, because of their own selfish interest, wrecking their people, wrecking their nations, wrecking their nations. So in that kind of scenario, the narrator, the child narrator is trying to justify what he has been said, that the world is not, Allah is not obliged to be fair to everyone, that so he says when he's trying to enshroud it within the metaphysical space. but human beings are not fair to ourselves. We are not fair to ourselves too. So in this regard, we have the cool reaper, and the cool reaper has a semblance. It has a semblance to Death Below Proud by John Cone. It has a semblance. The only point of convergence here is that the cool reaper is trying to say that, well, death takes the best of us. Death takes the best of us. So it takes your right, and